All right, welcome everybody to day 6. And actually on that note, we're about a weekend. If you're still going strong, congratulations. Please keep going. Okay, so today should be fun. We're going to figure out how to pass data from our routes file into our view. But as always, of course, before we get into that, why don't we solve the homework challenge from the last episode? Let's go. All right, homework. So if you remember, I asked you to update your navlink component to include a type prop. I said the type could be an anchor tag or a button, and we should inspect that value to determine whether or not we create an anchor tag or a button. So here's one option. And first, let's create a default value. So by default, if you don't pass a type prop when you reference the component here, we will assume that it is an anchor tag, but it could be a button. So why don't we try, let's imagine contact here should be a button. So I want to pass that in as a string so I don't have to include a colon because by default, it assumes a string, and that's what we want. All right. So the quick way to do it in this case is we could probably just get away with changing the tag name to reference our variable. Now, I say we could get away with this because I think it's going to work. Let's have a look. Refresh. And now we have home, about, but I bet when I click on contact, it doesn't work because it's being rendered as a button, as you see here. So yeah, it does work, but here's what I mean. If we switch back, notice our editor's struggling here. We got a lot going on. And if I hover over this squiggly line, it says tag start is not closed because it just can't handle something like this. So instead, what we might do is split it into 2 real tags. So here's what we could do. Let's undo it, bring it back to what we had, and we're going to take this in 2 steps. So first, we could open up traditional PHP tags, and I could say if type equals A, we're going to use the short tags, then display an anchor tag. And then down here, let's handle the else condition. And then finally, one more to close our conditional. Okay, so we could copy this, paste it in. And notice in this case, we could check if the type equals button, but in this case, it can only be an anchor tag or a button. So I can safely just say, if it's not an anchor tag, no matter what it is, we're going to treat it like a button. But yeah, if you want to be a little more strict, you can do that. Okay, so otherwise, create a button. So we're going to accomplish the exact same thing, but yeah, our editor will beat us up just a little bit less. All right, let's come back, refresh once again. And yeah, now we have home is an anchor tag, about is an anchor tag, and contact is a button. And of course, notice the button still has an href because we did pass it in. So of course, you would want to switch back. And if you're trying to create a button, then of course you would omit the href in that case. But yeah, it's still going to work just the same. Okay, so now finally, step 2, like I said, we can use these traditional PHP tags, of course, but Blade includes helpers to simplify some of these steps. So just keep in mind though, behind the scenes, it all gets compiled down to vanilla PHP as we've learned. But it's a little bit easier to use the Blade directives, just like what you learned about in the last episode when it came to props. So as it turns out, we could swap this out with a Blade directive called @if. So if, in this case, type equals A, then run this code. Next, this is else, right? So as you can guess, the Blade directive is called else. And then finally down here, endif, well, we have a Blade directive called endif. Yeah, that's what I mean. And let's reformat this real quick. There we go. It's the exact same thing. It's just a little bit easier on the eyes and easier on the fingers too. So let's go back to the browser, give it a refresh. Everything's working just like before. And again, I can't click on the context page because it's a button. That works. All right, but yeah, this was just an exercise. I'm undoing all of this because we don't need it in this case. It was just an example. Bring this back. I'm wearing out Command-Z, but I think we are in business. Okay, so let's move on to the topic for this episode, which is passing data to views. So let's close this out, and I'm going to go to my routes file. Now, I'll let you know right now, it helps initially to manually open the directory and find the file. But in real life, I'm not doing that. Usually I have the sidebar closed, and in my editor, and probably yours too, you could hit something along the lines of Command or Control P, and then you can type the file that you want to access. So in this case, it is web.php. And yeah, that's just normally how I would navigate my project. But yes, sometimes I will open the sidebar just to make it crystal clear where we're going in the code base. Okay, cool. So why don't we stick with the home page? So as it turns out, we can pass a second argument to this view function that will be an array where each of the keys will be extracted into variables once your view or your template is loaded. So for example, if I have greeting equals hello, well, now when I load my view, I will have access to a variable called greeting. Let's try it out. Make sure you're working along, by the way. So open up the sidebar. Again, we will go into our home view, and now I have access to a greeting. So I could swap this out with greeting, period. All right, so let's switch back, refresh, and whoops, looks like we have an error. And actually, this is a good opportunity to be introduced to Laravel's error page, which is really good. When I was just getting started, it wasn't nearly as helpful. But yeah, in this case, we can see the issue. It looks like it's related to our component, and we have an unclosed bracket. So I might have been a little bit too aggressive when we hit that Command-Z button. All right, did that fix it? Yes, it did. And sure enough, we have our greeting. So if we come back to routes, come back, refresh, it is working properly. So let's do another one. Name, none of these matter. I will do Larry Robots. Okay, now we have a greeting variable and a name variable. So I can reference that here. Just like that. Come back, refresh, everything's working. All right, very cool. So now let's switch back. Let's get rid of all of this, actually. Let's switch back and pass through something slightly more complex. Ultimately, in this course, we're going to build a jobs board. So why don't we start thinking about that? Maybe we could have a list of jobs that are currently available. So the variable name will be jobs, or the key name is jobs. And that won't be a string. It will be an array of available jobs where each item is its own array. And then you could have things like this, like what is the title of this job? Well, maybe director, and then maybe salary. And we'll lock that to, whatever, $50,000 a year. Okay, so there's one item. Why don't we do a total of 3? This next one is programmer. And this one, you know what? With AI, we're going down the tubes. Let's bring this down to $10,000 a year to be a human programmer. And then finally, why don't we have teacher at a school, maybe $40,000 or something like that. All right. So now when we load our view, we will have access to a jobs variable that is equal to a list of jobs. Now let's go ahead and loop over them. So again, I could open up PHP and say for each, but let's instead use one of the Blade directives. And again, what's cool about these directives is you can guess what they're called. If I want to do a for each, then the Blade directive is called for each. All right, for each jobs as job. And then, of course, you need to declare the end of the block, right? So you will almost always have an end and then the name of the directive, end for each. Okay, so let's begin with a simple list item where I echo out the job title. And let's have a look in the browser. Refresh, and there we go. We have 3 jobs, a director, a programmer, and a teacher. Next, why don't we do a colon, and we'll say pays, and then we'll do job salary per year. Come back, refresh, there we go. Why don't we make this bold? So what I'll do is wrap this within a simple strong tag. And there we go. So now with that in mind, why don't we tweak things just a little bit? Instead of an about page, I'm going to change this to a jobs page. Get rid of that. And if I were to come back to web, now this could become jobs, and that's going to load a view called jobs. Okay, so now I'm going to take or steal all of this and paste it in like so. And then this can return to a simple homepage. All right, So all I did was create a new route that listens for when the user visits example.com or example.test/jobs. And in response, it loads a view called jobs and it passes through this data that we're currently hard coding. But of course, in real life, that will probably be fetched from a database. And we'll talk about that in an episode or two. All right. So let's go into home, snatch our for each, and paste it into jobs. All right. And then finally, let's update the about page to point to jobs like so. All right. Refresh. And now we have a home page and a brand new jobs page that lists all of the jobs that are currently available for your business or whatever. Very cool. So I want to finish up, though, by making each of these clickable. And when I click on it, it should take me to a dedicated job listing page. So, how are we going to do this? Well, let's go back to jobs. And let's do this. We're going to have a list item. And of course, this should be wrapped. If you omit the UL, the browser will create it for you. But just a decent practice is to include it. So now we know these are all going to be anchor tags. So I will wrap them like so. And this is going to take us to a new route. Why don't we say jobs / and then maybe some kind of identifier or a slug that represents each individual job that we're offering. So let's add an identifier like ID. We're going to keep it really simple. ID is 1 for this one. ID is 2 for that one. And ID is 3 for this one. So now we have one key that is unique and will always be unique that represents this individual item. Okay, so now if we switch back to our job listings page, think about it. If I said job /1, we now have a hook of sorts that will say, all right, fetch me the job that has an ID of 1. If I did job /3, we know find me the job that has an ID of 3. We have a way to do that. Okay, but now how do we create the route for this? Because really we need a route that says, listen for jobs / and then some kind of value. It could be anything. It could be dynamic. So how do we do that? Well, I'm going to go back to my routes file here. And I'm going to create a brand new route. And why don't we reuse this one here to save some time? Listen for jobs / and then could be 1, could be 2, could be 3, could be 10,000, right? So why don't we instead represent this with, like a ID, or we could even call it job. What job do you want? But I'm going to call it ID just for now. So here's the cool thing about Laravel. Laravel will automatically detect that this is wrapped in braces, and it knows, this is a wildcard. So I'm gonna grab that, I'm gonna contain it, and then I will pass it to this function so that you can use it however you want. I'll show you. Let's call it ID, and then I'm going to dump an ID. And actually, instead of dump, I'm going to switch over to a DD function, which means dump and die. So dump the ID and then kill the execution. Because all I care about right now is just quickly seeing what is the value of this variable. So as it turns out, this dump function and the DD function, you are going to love, I promise. Okay, so let's switch back. Example.test/jobs/1, and we get 1. If I do 3, then we get 3. So notice it's a wildcard, and Laravel took care of all of the work of grabbing it, isolating it, and passing it to our closure here, or the callback function, which is so cool, isn't it? Okay, so now think about it. I'm going to duplicate this jobs listing, but again, we could extract it, and later we're going to do that, because a bunch of duplicated jobs isn't a great idea. But what I could do is have our list of jobs here. And then all we have to do is say, well, give me the job where the ID equals the one that you passed in. So why don't we say job equals, and do you know how to do this? Well, here's a number of ways to do it. You could do a for each, loop over each of the items, and then manually check, is the ID of that item equal to the ID that we're trying to reference? If so, that's the one you want. But as it turns out, you're using a framework, so you should leverage the framework. I will teach you about collections later in the series, but for now, it would be helpful to know that Laravel includes an ARR class, and that stands for array, of course. And this gives you access to countless methods, as you can see here, to interact with arrays. So if I want to find the first item within an array that matches some kind of criteria, I could use the first function. I give it our array, and then I provide a function, and this function will be called for each item within the array, and it will receive the current item. So in this case, it's going to loop over the jobs, and for each item, it will pass that into your function. So job would be equal to this on the first iteration, then this one, then this one. You get it. Okay, so now this should return a Boolean that indicates, is this the one you mean? Is this the first one you're trying to find? So in our case, we're going to say return job ID equals the ID that was passed in. But as you may know, because we're in a closure here, I don't have access to the ID here. So you have two ways to solve this. One, with traditional PHP, you would add use. Use the ID, make that available here, and that would do the trick. Another option is to instead use a short function that was only recently introduced as part of PHP 8.x, one of them. So that would take the form of this. fn, accept your job, then use an arrow, and then do, once again, job ID equals ID. But notice we don't run into that problem where we have to add use, and that's because of the scoping here. And this will do the exact same thing. And generally, if you can use a short closure here for things like this, I would recommend it. If it's new to you and it feels weird, everything feels weird at the beginning. Stick with it, and then you don't think about it ever again. All right, but do whatever one you feel most comfortable with right now. That's most important. And that'll give us our job. Okay, so now let's leverage our dump or our DD function to just do a sanity check. Did that work? All right, let's come back to the browser. All right, refresh. We are on job/3, and sure enough, it found that item. Let's go to job/2. It found that item. Job/1, very cool. But now what if it's job/5? We get null. So right now we have to be aware of that. The user might request a job that does not exist, and we have to figure out what to do in that situation. Okay, but happy path first. So now I'm going to return job, and I will pass through our job to the view. Finally, right here, we can use the fully qualified class path, but instead I'm going to import it. So you can do it manually or use whatever shortcuts your editor provides. In PHP Storm, I can press Option Return and do cleanup code. And now notice it automatically imports that at the top. Okay, so are we on the same page? We have a new route to show a job. Right now, we're just duplicating the list of jobs, but we'll fix that soon, I promise. And then we search for the job that has the matching ID that's included as part of the URI. Once it finds it, and this is happy path, so we assume that we're going to find it, we load a view. All right, let's go into our view now. And it looks like we don't have one yet. So I will copy jobs, paste it, and call this one job.blade.php. And then down here, maybe whatever you want. We could have an H2. This would be job title. And then we don't have much else. We could do a salary. This job pays job salary per year. And that's good enough for a little demo here. Real quick, let's add a couple classes here. These are Tailwind classes, text large. You can leave it blank if you want. But yeah, we're just making the font bold and the text slightly large. Easy enough for me. All right, back to the browser. And there we go. Here's our director position. What do we have here? Job with an ID of 1. Here's number 2 for a programmer. 3 for a teacher. It all works. So now think about it. All you have to do is link to that specific page within your job listings view. So right here, let's make it dynamic. Job ID. Let's see if it works. So here's our jobs page. We don't have any styling yet, but notice they are clickable. So here's our director position. Let's go back. Here's our programmer position. And here is our teacher position. So yeah, the last thing I'm going to do is just add, text blue, hover, underline for each of these. Just to make it, not great, but just to make it a little more clear that these are clickable links. Maybe I should be a teacher. All right, this job pays $40,000. Here's all the details. Here's a form I can fill out to learn more. We are well on our way to creating a jobs board. All right. So, yeah, we're not actually going to build the real jobs board platform until the end of the course when you feel quite a bit more comfortable. But yeah, throughout the series, you're going to see little nuggets, little traces of concepts that we might use once we start building that thing officially. So, you're doing great work. This video went a little long, so no homework today. I will see you in day 7.